Well, good afternoon now, folks. Once again, this is part B of this week's Lighting the Candle, A World That Works. I'm Bill Carell, still and again. I've got with me Ken Caputo and also my dear friend Vanessa Lewis. And I think by now, if you've listened to any of our other podcasts, you have an idea of who we are. But I just want to remind you that we're here having a conversation. It is totally unscripted, and believe you me, it looks that way a lot. That said, our goal here is to maybe trip over some stuff in conversation that allows for some thinking to occur, that allows for empowerment, to come into a situation where maybe there isn't empowerment going on right now. And once again, it actually seems like it's starting to clear up a little bit out there. Do I see blue sky over in the, up on the horizon? It's been a dreary gray day, raining, and again, we're here for you. We want to say some things that maybe you might have some questions with. Don't agree with it, agree with it, leave comments, tell us what you think. So with that said, Vanessa, you want to pick up from where we were on the other side?
Yeah, sure. So, and no introductions needed, right, this time around?
I think we're good.
Okay. So on the other side, our conversation definitely shifted, as they tend to on these podcasts, which is great. I hope our listeners follow along really well. We started out talking about wisdom, and I just want to share a quote. Socrates said, "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing." And I'll say it again: the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. And that was Socrates that said that. And so I consider myself a curious person, and I guess I kind of relish in the fact that I know nothing. What we were talking about originally, though, where the conversation shifted is, and how I'm now trying to relate it back to where we started in talking about wisdom is, culturally, there are art forms, there are books, there's music, there's movies, somehow, and there's even ideologies that start to resonate with every generation. And Bill was saying that he was saying, how is it that young kids today tend to like the same kind of music, for example, that he did when he was the age of a kid today that likes this music, like say any music from the 60s. How is it that all of a sudden, Jimi Hendrix is cool among kids today who are 16 and 17 years old? And he was obviously cool with kids who were 16 and 17 years old when he was out and alive and just hit the scene. And that's just one example. But and the other thing is, and guys, stop me if I'm getting off subject at all. I'm trying to stay on the track here. But no, never mind. I was going to quote another thing that Bill said.
If
I'll just quote it.
If you want a handshake, what I'll do is I'll just toss in, do you know how Socrates died?
Go ahead, tell
me. About the power being in the listening.
Say that again?
You know how Socrates met his demise? He was arrested by the powers that be in Athens, Greece, and he was put to trial, and he was accused of demagoguery to the detriment of the youth of the city of Athens, of the city-state of Athens, and he was sentenced to death by drinking hemlock. So, yes, so I'm saying to you, by accident, I think, came up with some evidence that the power is in the listening. and how things are being listened and who's doing what with those, I think is a very, very interesting thing to step back and take a look at. And you stop and think about how much Socrates and the Socratic method and all those sorts of things are in all of our culture now. We don't have any real evidence or proof that the guy ever existed, other than, you know, the writings of other people that were around from his time and books that have been attributed to him, and Plato and other great thinkers. But as we're looking at the whole notion, we went from wisdom to what is wisdom. What started out as being a very wise man, being a great educator and teacher, and being out on the skinny branches in terms of the possibility of being for human beings, to him then being a heretic and being accused of stealing the minds of the youth of the city-state of Athens. Kind of interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is interesting. I think it's interesting how it's also an example
Yes.
of how you know what we were just talking about, how is it that quotes from people thousands of years ago resonate with us today? Now, is that because these quotes tap into our wisdom, you know, innate wisdom?
I think it's similar to, you know, I mean, the question becomes, even like with the music, what is it about that form of art expressed in that way that touches something that's shared with other people that are afflicted with this condition we call being human, you know? Mm-hmm. And that's really all it is, you know? And it's very interesting, like, you know, the Socrates thing. I mean, you know, so he presented something that obviously felt threatening, you know, and other people who were threatened by that did something about it. You know, I mean, and that's part of the human condition too. We go into a protective mode if we feel that something's going to change in a way that's going to present a danger to us or to others that are in our circle of protection. It's tribal, you know. So yeah, I mean, that would be my thought. And the last thing, I'm sure, I would bet that Socrates really would not have cared whether he was ever remembered or attributed to anything, as long as the work survived and made a difference. You know, that was just not relevant. You know,
like he got that done, Ken.
Yeah, exactly. So mission accomplished. So whatever, you know, we all die. So, you know, it was just when it was his time, if he planted those seeds and they grew, you know, then that's it.
Yeah. You have to remember, I kind of summarized his entire life in 3 or 4 sentences. There's a whole lot on there. And
oh yeah,
I know you and I share a love of the classics and you know, the original thinking that we think we have at this day and age. It's just coming to bear in each cultural episode of advancing, when the people are tired of listening to the program and they start thinking for themselves. The next logical step is, holy mackerel, this kind of occurs to me as a neat idea. And then go find out, gee whiz, it was been done over and over and over again in every tradition on the planet, from the Far East to the Inca Empire, to Rome and Greece, etc. So we were also talking in the last segment about echo chambers and kind of the litmus test for are you or are you not experiencing life in an echo chamber. And I'm offering, what if, you know, the access to thinking for yourself has less to do with being able to parrot other truisms and more to do with asking questions about what you're hearing. You know, and so the next question is what, if any, evidence do you see in this day and age that there are people that are questioning certain behaviors, that there are people that are actually not adding or piling on with evidence that something is or isn't going a particular way, but if how many people are actually standing up and saying, stop the music. What is going on? What the dickens is actually going on around here?
There's lots of people doing that. Yeah, no, they're just doing the work. They're not trying to, it's like if someone's drowning in 3 feet of water, you can't yell in their face to just put their feet on the ground. They can't hear that, you know? So you got to figure out how to get their feet on the ground, you know? I mean, so they're not trying to outshout. They're not arguing or debating. They're just doing the work, you know? So at least the ones that I talk to, that's what they're doing. And, you know, and they don't get overly excited about the noise. It's just symptomatic, and they're more interested in, you know, their symptomatic expressions. They're more interested in treating the disease, you know. But the other thing that was interesting, you're talking about listening, and one of the things we teach the kids is to listen inside and out. So, you know, so for example, someone tells you you have a limiting belief. What's your relationship to that statement? Do you get defensive? Do you push against it? Or like if I said that to my mentor, he'd say, well, of course I do. We all do. I am ignorant. On every level, I'm ignorant. And he doesn't judge that as a bad thing. He just sees that as human, you know? So when you hear something that comes in, you know, go back to the curiosity, you listen to how you feel about that thing and then get curious about why you feel that way about that thing. Now that dissolves a lot of that tension and resistance, you know, that happens.
Again, powerful listening.
Yeah.
Whatever comes out of your mouth about me is a contribution, no matter how it sounds to me. If you kind of start off with that premise and you go and invite people, you know, to say what's on their mind and on their heart, most of the time, in my experience, Ken, they're not talking about you as much as they're talking about themselves, you know?
Yep.
The perception and how they are hearing and what they're left with is personal. And as far as they know, it's the truth. It is. So the neat thing about, you know, when we're talking about the power being in the listening, and I'm posing this as a question. If the conversation persists and the conversation is continued and there's a demand for the whatever is coming, you know, from a source, and that source gets replicated and the source becomes amplified, and there are more people being drawn to listening to the conversation or music or whatever it is, then there's also money that flows to it, along with energy, along with all sorts of different things. And what's really interesting is that at some point, the being famous and being listenable at some level now becomes monetized, and we have a generation of people who are no longer listening critically to the words in a rap song. They're not listening critically, you know, as they're watching someone who makes 100 million to 500 million a year on Instagram, and watching them change the color of their shoes so that millions of other people will go do the same thing. Just kind of wonder, you know, how would we take that kind of leverage, that kind of mechanism, and use it for the empowerment and use it for the upgrading of all people in the United States, for example?
Was Dale Carnegie the one that said he committed the first half of his life to accumulating wealth and the second half to giving it away? I can't remember if that was Dale Carnegie.
Was it Dale? It was Andrew Carnegie.
Andrew Carnegie. Okay.
If it was one of those titans, yeah. But I can't tell you for sure. I've heard that said several times.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, it's an interesting thing how, you know, I mean, your money is just energy, and really what it comes down to is your relationship with it. You know, if you're coming from a place of feeling that you need to hoard it to hold on to it, to protect it, then you're going to have one way of expressing. It's going to express one way, you know, and if it's something you want to, you know, divert into a flow that, you know, if your center of gravity, I guess I'll explain it this way. If your center of gravity is more towards a we than an I, you're going to have one relationship with it. If your center of gravity is more towards the I than the we, you're going to have another relationship with it. And that is not a fixed point. It can oscillate and shift throughout your life. So you see it all the time. You're focused on work, work, work. And then one of your kids gets sick. All of a sudden, work isn't the thing you're going to focus on. You just shift instantly, you know, to a new paradigm, you know? So yeah, so I don't know. It just, like I said, it just comes, I think it always comes back to, for each of us, making some decisions as to who we want to be in the world. And then as events move to and through us, you know, do the best we can to stay focused on who we choose to be and how we choose to express what's given to us.
Vanessa,
Maybe.
any thoughts? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I was just looking up. So yes, it was Andrew Carnegie. You guys are right that said that quote. I spent the first half of my life making money, and the second half of my life giving it away to do the most good and the least harm. So that's pretty cool. I'm glad you brought up that quote.
Well, I'll tell you, it's just
Okay.
let me just share one more thing, Vanessa. With that's you know, it's for me, that helped change my relationship with money. And what I learned was I can't actually help, like as a business owner, if I don't generate revenue. I can't really help.
Mm-hmm.
I only have so much I can give away of my time and knowledge without, you know, basically accumulating some energy, some wealth, and then I can do things like pay off school lunch debt and sponsor little league teams. But if the money doesn't come in, I can't redistribute it, you know? So that was an interesting, yeah, so that quote always stuck with me and kind of made it okay. I had trouble with making money, you know, like the thought of making money, and, you know, when other people didn't have as much. So if you see yourself as a focal point to where you can benefit others through that accumulation, that's a different thing.
It's all about your relationship to whatever it is that's important to you.
Yep.
Again, I wonder if people are looking to distinguish what's important to them. And in many cases, what they're looking for is being answered by someone else. And the answer sometimes doesn't turn out to be the answer that really is what's important to them. So a lot of the statements that I make are really questions. I mean, I don't know anything. However, if you stop and think about what's true for you, the different episodes of your life, and again, I like how you say, you know, the leaning towards I or we is going to give you a very different perspective and a different experience of life, and probably, you know, a different set of outcomes, you know, potentially. So I really do wonder at this point in time. I don't know anybody else that's engaging in this question right at the moment. Do you?
Ask that again.
Well, let's put it to you this way. Let's just say, what if you held a contest and you asked a question and you got 150 million people involved in it, and half of the people said this is the answer, and the other half of the people said this is the answer? What does that tell you, if anything?
Tells me that you need to ask a better question. Just means that you're not asking a good enough question. You didn't go deep enough. You know, you didn't find that common reason we all love the music, you know? That's all. And probably the person who asked the question, their center of gravity is a little more towards the I instead of the we. So on some level, you know, so whether they know it or not.
Interesting. Vanessa?
Still processing.
Yeah, this is us, folks. We're not looking for answers here as much as we are engaging and kind of dwelling in the question. What does it mean? What does it mean to live your life from, yeah, this is what my friends are doing, I get it, to,
Yeah.
is there more after that?
Okay. No, I was just going to say, though, for our listeners, if you're, ever watching this on Facebook and there's a comment space below, if you have any questions that come up as we're asking these questions, because Bill's exactly right. We come in, and Ken said it too, we come in and we just sort of dwell in these questions. And then, as we speak about answers by just offering up our own opinions based on our own knowledge and perhaps our own sources of wisdom, and then other questions come about. And so, if you, our listeners, are coming across any questions, feel free to ask them as well, and we'll just kind of add it into the pot and stir it around and just, see what else comes up. I think really, I can be a big picture thinker sometimes. And I think that's what this is all coming down to. We're coming up with these questions just to ask better questions, and really deep down we may not ever have the answer. And that's exactly what we were talking about when we started out, especially in our first our segment just before this. We were talking about what wisdom is. And many years ago, I remember someone saying, and it was really kind of at the start when social media was really starting to heat up, and they were saying that we are drowning. It's been said that we're in the information age, and we are drowning in knowledge. You can get knowledge on anything. You want to learn how to shoot bow and arrow, you go on YouTube. You want to learn how to fix, do your own oil change on your car, go on YouTube. Or that's the more popular one now for getting our information. We just learn through videos. But you want to find out, like last week I was doing research on the Civil War. So I type in my Kindle and I have all these books that come up, all these articles that come up through Google. I can find out anything I want to. And we want to learn how to speak a foreign language. I know I'm going on and on, but my point is we have no limit to finding knowledge if we want to. It's out there. And that's a blessing in many ways. But maybe it's also a curse. So I didn't finish the quote I was saying earlier, but this person said, and they were a very spiritual person, and they said, we are drowning in information, but we're starved for wisdom. And so perhaps that lays out another question for us now. But, we're inundated with access to be able to learn anything that we want. It's a candy store for me because I'm the curious one. But at what point do we stop asking questions and find the answer?
Another question, Vanessa, is at what point do we start asking questions as opposed to finding answers?
So, right, Bill. So in that case, do we just give up on trying to find an answer and just accept that we just will find more questions, especially because what we're talking about, maybe what we're talking about will never completely have answers. And that's okay. I'm okay with that. I love all these questions that come about. Yeah. I love when Ken mentions a quote from his mentor or shares an experience from that. By the way, I'd love to meet your mentor, Ken. He sounds
Yes,
amazing.
you would.
Very meetable.
What's that?
I said he is very meetable. He's just a genuinely great.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, just that, and when Bill very often brings up a piece of art, a movie that he saw or a song that he brings to mind the lyrics from something we were talking about. And I just love that. And it creates more questions. I think our biggest question is why. And I think that's what we're all trying to answer, why. And it's almost like we get into the existential sometimes. So, hey.
So what my mentor shared with me was we already know the answer. The answers are known. It's just getting to the place where we recognize what that answer is. I mean, no one discovered gravity. It was always there. It's just at some point, someone decided to start figuring out how to understand it. And I think the challenge with all the information, it's kind of like if you have a problem in your business and you sit there and you have 50 meetings talking about the problem, you're never going to solve it. At some point, you just have to do something and be okay with not being right. In fact, what's best is to test it, figure out what doesn't work about it, and then recalibrate and just keep repeating that process, and it's just, I mean, I've never met a wise person. I've met people who are committed to the path of wisdom, so it's all a process. And so any answer you have that you get is going to be temporary anyway, because it's just going to change your perspective and then it'll reveal more questions. So, so trying to find answers to me seems like a sort of a waste of time. And instead it's just continuing to be in a place of curiosity and discovery,
Completely agree. And let me just back up to the internet model. If you stop when you get to your first YouTube video about changing your oil, that may or may not give you the information of the leads that you have to disconnect from your sensor in order and to reset it after the oil's been changed. And also, if you look on the page where you searched for changing the oil on the car or changing the oil on your model of car or your model of the car, the year, and whatever size engine it is, you can come up with thousands of different answers to the question. That in itself is very overwhelming. And it also kind of, in my opinion, it also demonstrates the point that most folks are interested in an answer. And most folks, it's like why are your keys always in the last place you look? For most people, finding the key or the keys wherever they left them is I mean, that's what their life is about, as opposed to going to the next step and always putting their keys in the same place. Just a little small shift in terms of taking an unempowering situation and turning it into one where you now have some stability, in that little small crevice in your life called, where are my keys? But I always enjoyed that. Why is whatever you're looking for in the last place that you look? Because people stop looking for physical objects. They stop looking for answers to questions the same way, in many cases, I say. And the fun begins when people say, well, yes, and that's a good answer. And what if that,
yeah.
And where does that bring us when we look beyond that first answer?
Yes, I agree. Yes, and instead of yes, but.
Exactly. So I will share.
Or just Go ahead.
I was just going to say, when I showed up for University of Colorado all those years ago, I was in a class where they were talking about the body of knowledge at that time was doubling every 25 years. This is 1972. and that was twice as fast as it was in 1955, which was twice as much as it was in 1900. So by the time I started my business, the body of knowledge in 1990 was doubling every 2 years. This is what's possible to be known, what's being documented and codified all across the world. Language, et cetera, doubling every single year. And then now we're talking about it doubling at the rate of months, simply because there's just so much out there. We have AI, we have all of these things where we just give artificial intelligence an issue that we want them to dive into, and then we step back and let them go. And not only are they creating answers, they're creating questions, and they're creating ways to self-improve on the code that they're operating with. It's a very interesting time to be a human being and take a moment. Sometimes what you want to concentrate on is not what's going on way out there, but what's going on right around here. What if you can focus on that and get a sense of well-being out of creating a safe space for yourself to operate in where you go and what you do as a routine? What if?
Can I ask a question?
You just did. You want to ask another one? Go ahead, Vanessa.
Yeah, well, if someone talked about quotes earlier, there's a business quote that says the person who discovered the problem is the one most likely to solve it. Have you guys heard that quote before?
Yep.
Okay. I don't know who it's attributed to.
No idea.
No, okay. But it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
I feel like it goes along with what someone was saying earlier about, the answer. Maybe deep down, and then this is what taps into, again, this discussion about wisdom, is deep down we all have the answers.
Mm-hmm.
It's just they're buried. These are questions. I don't know.
Well, it's there's a filter between us and the wisdom, the answer. So, and there's all these filters. Some of them we create ourselves, some are created by other people. So it's like piercing through all of these illusions that we surround ourselves with, that's just part of being human. But it's funny. So I had a question, Bill, like if you're, I'm just going to say my question. What qualities could 80% of us agree we could value in our political leadership? So instead of thinking about your platform or your stance or, just talking about the person, are there any qualities that 80% of the population could agree with that we would all value in political leadership?
So you would come up with a really meaty question right at the top of the hour. How about put this in as a jumping off for the next time? I absolutely love the question. And again, I'm going to restate what I think I heard, which is, what are the qualities that 80% of us could agree on we would want to have present in our political leadership?
Yeah. And it's probably more, not even what are they, but are there? I mean, is there literally one thing, even one, that 80% of us, no, I'm not saying everyone, because no matter what you do, 20 to 30% are just going to disagree because they can, for whatever reason. So, and to me, it's less about even knowing what that is. It's just, again, asking a better question. So now you're not, you're going a layer deeper. You're thinking about the type of human that we believe and could learn to trust could be successful in that role, So I don't want someone running my restaurant if they're an unsanitary slob. I don't care how good a cook they are. If they're going to kill my customers, I don't want them, so there's like certain qualities that are more important about them as the person than the skills that they have, so that's where that question came from. Because I've been thinking about for the last 20 minutes, like what's a better question in that, specific environment. So that was all I could come up with right now.
So Vanessa, while you're saying goodbye, would you have another question to add on top of that one as you standing on the shoulders of Ken's question?
What qualities could 80% of the population agree with in political leadership? But then you mentioned you had an example about a non-political leadership with the restaurant owner. So it's interesting that you asked about our political leadership instead of just asking about our leader in general. Unless you're thinking that political leadership would indicate, obviously the landscape we're in right now, but the thinking that a lot of us have right now, but also because leading a country is such a big responsibility. Is that kind of where you're going with that?
It was more, Bill had said, what do we do about the fact that, we had kind of 50, you look at the vote, you obviously have a very polarized vote as it relates to electing the person that we believe can lead our country moving forwards. So, so I was trying to think of a question that goes beneath that. I mean, we are where we are right now. However, where are we going to be in 4 years? What are the actions? What are the better questions that can be asked now that could create space for better decisions to be made, in the years to come? So I was thinking literally in terms of, political elections and that whole process, so, but yeah, I mean, we could go much broader than that. Absolutely. I was just trying to be a little bit specific, and that was what I came up with.
No, I think it's a great question. I do. And I think our listeners would have a lot to say about it for sure. They could offer up their opinions.
Well, and the best thing, a good question when it leads to engaged conversation and vigorous debate and disagreement, healthy disagreement. All those things are good signs that you're onto something.
That's part of the sausage making process, as they say, but the real proof of the pudding is in the eating, okay? And the actions that come after all of whatever that energy was. And if we can, let me just go back to our friend, that poor Socrates. We had a student that you may have heard of as well, whose name was Plato. And Plato was, he had an ambition to be a great playwright and to write great oratory, for the entertainment of the people of Athens. And after Socrates' execution, he was inspired to pitch all of that and devote himself to philosophy. And funny enough, we all get to read all of that good stuff thousands of years later. So with all of that in mind, let's leave the thought out there. What's a better question that you can ask about anything that doesn't seem to be going quite right? With that said, we'll say our goodbyes and thank you for watching Lighting the Candle, A World That Works.
Bye-bye.
Adios, everyone.
Bye, everyone. See you next time.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, A World That Works, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can hear us at exvadio.com/podcasts, Apple Podcasts app, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and wherever you find podcasts.